This is Christian Book Blurb, brought to you by author and songwriter Matt McCleary. Get a behind-the-scenes glimpse into the lives of some of your favourite Christian authors, hear about their books and faith. Also, why not check out my website, mattmccleary.com. Hello and welcome to this edition of the Christian Book Blurb podcast, where we like to encourage you in your discipleship one book at a time, as we meet some amazing Christian authors and learn about their books, their lives, and their faith. Well, thank you for clicking over here today. I'm your host, Matt McCleary, and it's great to be with you. Now, on today's show, I'm going to be speaking with the author, Lydia Jenkins, all about her new book, The Son of Endless Days. So, Lydia, hello and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Matt. Thank you very much for having me on.
Now, you've written a novel, Son of Endless Days, and it's the first of a series, I believe. What can you tell us about it?
Yeah, so Son of Endless Days is the first of a dystopian fiction series called the Merit Hunter series, which is set in a city called Chulo, which is built on a meritocracy. So only the productive are rewarded with merit points, and it follows AJ and Jenny, who are a young couple in their 20s, both trying to make it to the top of society. But each of them have secrets that threaten their relationship and all of their ambitions.
Interesting. And I know it's part of a series. Do we know yet how many books there will be in this series?
Yeah, so it's a 4-part series. I've actually published the first 3 already. So I did a bit of I originally published them, the first 2, a couple of years ago, and then I relaunched them all last year with new branding and new titles. And so I've been working on making sure that's consistent in my marketing, and the older stuff is gone. But yeah, so the first 3 are already out there, and I'm currently working on the 4th.
Yeah, and this is the first book, so it's a great way to get into the story and the world and everything else. So it's a fictional novel, and as you've already said, it's part of the dystopian genre. Now, for some of our listeners, they hear that, and either they might not know what it is, or if they do, they might be a bit scared by the word because it sounds a bit weird. So, what is dystopian fiction?
So dystopian fiction is usually set in a futuristic world where some sort of disaster has happened. It might be a climate disaster, it might be an overthrow of governmental power, but the main feature of dystopian fiction is that there's an oppressive system over society. And so that then lends itself to quite dark environments, quite totalitarian environments. The original, people call the original dystopias sort of Brave New World and 1984 by George Orwell, but they were actually inspired by a Russian novel called We, whose author's name I forget and can't pronounce. But they originally served as being a warning to society. So, hey guys, if we carry on along this track, this is where we're going to end up. So, for example, 1984 is very much speaking into the suppression of individual expression, and how if we continue with this industrialization and all of this use of technology, we're all going to end up the same. That was sort of some of George Orwell's thinking. So yeah, dystopian fiction sort of then evolved with the likes of The Hunger Games and The Giver into a lot of young adult stories, which is looking at teenage self-expression. But fundamentally, dystopian fiction is set in quite a dark environment and serves as a warning to society.
Mm-hmm. And with all that sort of in background, and you've mentioned some other books like Hunger Games and such like, they're not Christian in their worldview. Yours is, or it's. I get hints of it in the first book. I have to keep reading to find the story to unfold more. But how does the genre kind of fit with a Christian worldview? How can Christian writers use dystopian fiction? How can they use it as a tool to tell people about God and Jesus and explore that sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I've sort of developed as a writer and a reader as well, I've read a lot of dystopian books that very much present Christian principles and Christian values. And the way that the dystopian genre is quite a dark environment lends itself to show goodness and light, using, those contrasting images and contrasting ideas. And I think going back to the idea of a dystopian book serving as a warning or serving as a tool to express a particular thought about an area, that lends itself really well. So, for example, with my books, it's very much focusing on things such as having your career as an idol, seeking external validation. And so the genre allows me to say to readers, hey, let's not put all of our worth into the work that we do or what others think about us, because actually our worth is so much more than that. And so, that's very similar to, I'm sure you know Liz Carter, who's also written a dystopian trilogy, which begins with Repression Ground. And that's a very similar idea around our worth in God rather than our worth in material or worldly things. And so the dystopian genre just allows us as authors present a Christian way of looking at things.
Do you think presenting it in a fictional way and in this kind of other world, as it were, because it's sort of this world, but it isn't. It's kind of removed from our world in a way, although it really reflects our world a lot. It kind of dials up the I don't know, the darkness is dialed up, but the light's also dialed up to give you those contrasts. But do you think it creates a safer space, do you think, to discuss and explore some of these things, whereas other genres might not?
Yeah, I think so. I think it allows us to discuss characters who are, as you say, very removed from our immediate setting and who are in scenarios that we probably wouldn't find ourselves in. For example, the characters in my stories, they take a drug called skip sleep, which effectively allows them to skip sleep. And so they've got more hours in the day to continue working. Now, we don't necessarily have anything like that other than perhaps coffee and energy drinks. So it's a little bit removed, but we can relate. And I think you're right. It does, having the characters who aren't necessarily in the same environment exactly that we're in allows people to open their minds a little bit more and actually think, okay, well, if I was in that world and I was in that situation, how would I act? And it was really interesting because I've had quite a few comments from people about AJ, who is the main character, and how they don't like him. And I always respond with, it's kind of a little bit of the point. I understand that obviously when you're reading a novel, you want to connect to the character in order to root for them and that sort of thing. But actually, we get a lot of AJ's inner monologue and we hear a lot of his ugliness and the things that he maybe thinks about other people and thinks about himself. And actually, it challenges us to think, oh yeah, I have those thoughts sometimes. And you see it without your own emotion connected with it. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, that's been quite an interesting response.
Yeah, and you deal with other things in the book as well, like, well, as you say, success, chasing success, and also sort of wanting to be liked. But it's not being liked for who you are. It's like a superficial thing. Like, we see it in our lives with social media, and you're chasing the likes, or how many followers do I have on whatever platform it is. They have a similar system, but the implications of it are a lot more severe and drastic than ours, which is just some likes on Facebook or whatever. But yet some people still really place their value in their self-worth in that and go chasing after it. And success
Guilty,
as well.
Hands up.
Yeah, I know it's a tricky one, but it's some of those narratives that run through life today that are kind of explored, which I find very interesting. So your main character, as you said, his name is AJ, and in your novel Son of Endless Days, it becomes apparent that he's not being truthful. What's your take on
Yeah.
truth and lies? And is there such a thing as a white lie? Or, without giving the plot away, how has telling lies affected AJ?
Yeah. Oh gosh, philosophical question of a white lie. Probably not. I think any time that you're not being authentic is a lie, is a lie, is a lie, right? And the lies that AJ tells in the novel, and obviously I don't want to, as you say, go too much into it, actually means that many of the relationships he has or he believes he has are inauthentic, are based on something that is not real. And in the subsequent books, you see how that has knock-on effects into the lives of other people, such as his girlfriend and his grandma, into his best friend. So there's just a whole series of events that unravel with his lies. And it starts from something quite understandable, actually, from when he was a child, a very simple desire of wanting to be worthy, which in this society everybody wants. So it starts from that simple desire, but then in order to get there, he tells a lie, and then he needs to tell another lie, and yeah, you get the idea. It just dominoes, really. And so it's been a really interesting way, especially over the series of books, to see the different characters reacting to AJ's actions and how they feel about him and their own development in looking towards forgiveness or not forgiving him. So yeah, it's been a really interesting journey in that sense.
And some of the, I think unintentionally, I don't think you set out to explore some of this. Maybe you did, but for me anyway, reading it, I kept catching myself thinking about thoughts around immigration and also like refugees, because AJ's kind of in that in between transitionary kind of place, and you can kind of see some of the desperate choices people make in those situations in the character himself. And so yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, that's really interesting. There's definitely a whole theme going on about outcasts from from a particular society, city, country, whatever, and how do we treat people who are not one of us, in inverted commas, and how do we treat people who believe different things to us, and like how do we cut them out? How do we? Yeah, you're right. It does explore those sorts of things, and actually, while the sort of outcasts in my books kind of represent people of faith, really, it's also a challenge on all of us for different viewpoints, different. How can we be loving towards each other rather than oppressive or repressive, really?
And your novel centers around, as you've said, the idea of those who are deemed worthy or are unworthy, the sort of those who are accepted and those who are the outcast. Your book doesn't really go into this in much detail. It might do later. I've only read the first one. But because you've been writing about this and exploring it, I'm sure you've got some thoughts on, well, what does it mean to be worthy? And not necessarily in your created world, but in our world today, in our lives. How does knowing God and what God thinks of us, how is worthiness supposed to work?
Yeah, so I mean, fundamentally, where I've got to, sort of writing these books has been my way of exploring this, and my way of, with God, battling a bit with what does this actually mean, And ultimately, the point I've got to is that none of us are worthy. We've all fallen short of the glory of God. And so any worthiness that we have all comes by God's grace and all comes through what Jesus did rather than what we do. And so it's actually not chasing towards career, chasing towards the opinions of other people, towards success for our salvation, but it's just him. It's just him. It is not about even what he might give us, but actually getting to know him. And through that relationship, through our belief in Jesus, that means we're worthy. And that's just like such an incredible truth, because we were never worthy in the first place, you know? And it's sort of recognizing how much grace we have been given, and therefore then extending that grace to other people as well.
Yeah. Coming back to your novel, where I'm up to in the series, the first book, as I've said, Son of Endless Days, you start to give hints at an alternative path to the one that everyone's aspiring to in Tula City, and they, wanting success and fame and everything else, and are skipping sleep to try and achieve it all and have it all. But there's this alternative belief system that's kind of there's undercurrents, and it pops up every now and then in some unexpected places with unexpected, unassuming people. The name given to it in your novel is The Guiding Light, who teaches this different path. So why do you think it's important to present an alternative belief system like Christianity or something similar to it in your novels?
Yeah, it's just showing that contrast, and actually showing a contrast in terms of how people live and how those characters then have a different perspective, and actually how they live their lives is much smoother and much, but not perfect. I think that was the thing I was trying to get across, was this alternative way doesn't mean that everything goes well, because it really, really doesn't. And in book 2 in particular, you see that a lot more, because we get a lot more of the side, which is the sort of outcast community, and how they live, but also that they do work really hard. So Command, the government in Chulo, have sort of suggested that those who follow the guiding light are lazy and unproductive, and they believe in constantly resting and not doing anything. And you see that very quickly that is not true. And so what I didn't want to get across is that, if you believe in Jesus, you don't have to do a day of work in your life. That's absolutely not true. Work is great. Work is good. It's a calling from God. But yeah, it's allowing people to think a little bit by seeing those characters and seeing that different way and thinking, well, actually, what values do I want to have in my life? What way do I want to approach work? How do I want to connect with other people? Where do relationships sit in terms of my priorities in my life? So yeah, it's been a really cool way for me to figure that out for myself and figure that out for my relationship in God. Like, how do you see this, God? How do you see the way I approach my work? How do you see the way I approach my marriage? And actually using the way God has used my fiction to teach me that is just an amazing thing, because his ways are clearly not our ways, because I wouldn't have thought of that. Like, how can I figure this out? Oh, write a whole dystopian book series. Like, yeah.
That's really good. So as Christians, we may feel like some of your characters on the side. We might feel pushed aside, or even shunned sometimes for the beliefs that we have, or we feel like the odd ones out because everyone else is believing something else, and we're the weird ones because we believe something different. So like some of the characters in your book, we might feel what we want to hide our beliefs in order to fit in. What's your advice for those who might be experiencing this kind of situation?
Yeah, I mean, I've been there. I still am there a lot of the time. There can be a real fear in certain scenarios of expressing your faith, and therefore then being outcast for it. But in my experience, actually, I found that assumptions I have made about certain people have been completely wrong, in the sense of, oh, they're going to react like this if they know I'm a Christian, or they're going to do this. And actually, I recognize that a lot of my fear came from my judgments, you know? So what is trying to figure out whether that fear is actually based on your own judgments of somebody else, first and foremost. And then also just like praying for people, praying that God will cover you, praying that actually if you do face negativity, to hold God's opinion of you and the opinion of those closest to you highest, because you are going to have people who disagree with you. There is, if that's anything I've learned in my 20s, actually, is that not everyone's going to like you. And actually there's aspects of that where you take a situation, pray through it, see what God and the Holy Spirit is saying about that situation where you might need to make adjustments. And other than that, then cover that other person in prayer, is how I'd say. Pray for those who persecute you.
Good advice. Thank you. So we've been chatting with Lydia Jenkins about her novel, Son of Endless Days, which is the first in a part of a 4-book series. We're going to be back just after these, chatting more with Lydia, more about her faith and her life. So stay tuned. If you enjoy listening to this podcast, you can help keep it on the web. All you've got to do is buy me a coffee. Head over to buymeacoffee.com/Matt McCleary to make a donation. There is a link in this episode's show notes. So go on, buy me a coffee today and help this podcast to keep supporting Christian books and authors. Hello, welcome back to the Christian Book Blurb podcast, where we've been chatting with author Lydia Jenkins all about her book, Son of Endless Days, a dystopian fiction novel that's well worth a read. So do go and check it out. Now, Lydia, this part of the show, we like to get to know the author a little bit.
Okay.
So what do you like to do for fun?
For fun, I play netball once a week. So I've done that since I was about 10 years old.
Are you part of a club, or are you in a league, or how does it work?
And yes. Well, we're a bit amateur, really. Like, we don't train or anything. We just turn up on a Monday night. Just turn up on a Monday night and play netball. But we are in a league, yeah.
Okay.
We've been up and down the last couple of years. You know, promoted, demoted, bit of a yo-yo team.
Okay.
So
does that affect
netball.
how much sponsorship you get, like football, or not quite?
Yeah, there's not much of that going on. So yeah, I like playing netball. I love to read as a writer. Just spending time with family and friends, and I adore traveling. Absolutely love exploring new places. Yeah.
Where's one of the best places you've visited?
New Zealand. That's by a long way, actually. Like,
just because of the landscape, or because Lord of the Rings was filmed there, or what are your reasons?
No, yeah, the landscape. We went out there 2 years ago, and we hired a camper van and drove around the South Island, and it was just sensational. I mean, you're sort of driving along. 1 minute you feel like you're in Scotland, the next you feel like you're in Australia. I mean, it's just absolutely breathtaking. And some of the landscape's very similar to Canada, but it's also concentrated because it's a smaller country. So, yeah. And I think really I say New Zealand because I might not never go back. It's kind of like a once in a lifetime thing. So yeah.
It is a long way.
It's a really long way.
Yeah. It really is. And for those who are listening, and you might even be in New Zealand listening to this thinking, what is it a long way? It's because we both live in the UK. So
Yes.
It's quite a long distance for us, but it's a beautiful place. Wonderful. Do you have other jobs, other pursuits that you do other than writing, or is writing? And I know you're a bit famous on TikTok as well. Is that all you do?
I think famous might be a bit of a strong word, but I'll take it.
Well, hopefully after this podcast you'll get some more subscribers.
Maybe. Yeah, I mean, I do social media content more around my writing and my books. I'm particularly focusing on people in their 20s. So that's really who my book was for when I was writing them, is that actually your 20s are a very uncertain time of your life, and there's loads going on there that a lot of people don't talk about. So it's sort of my entry into that sort of space. I also work for a small publishing house 2 days a week, and I work for my church as well. So I do have a different portfolio of things going on. And I do editing and proofreading with other authors as well. So it really feels like God's pointing me towards the publishing world, and where that's going to go in terms of how I can empower other authors, I don't know yet, but that is something that I would love to do. And also continuing to write books for people in their 20s would be great, you know. Maybe not all dystopian ones, but more contemporary commercial ones about 20-something characters experiencing different things, you know. So I lost my mum last year, and actually I'd love to write a book about losing a parent in your 20s and what that means for how you feel about the future and all of that. So yeah, there's a lot of ideas going around. Which ones I'll pursue, I don't know yet. So it's all in God's hands. As much as I try to take it out of his hands.
Yeah. Have you got any favorite things to eat?
Favorite things to eat? I love Thai food.
Oh.
Actually.
Do they do Thai food in New Zealand? Now that would be good.
I don't think I had any Thai food in New Zealand, but I'm sure they have Thai food. I had lots of Thai food in Thailand.
In Thailand? Well,
yeah.
Don't they just call it food there?
Yes, yeah, they do. But it's really funny because, like, if you think of a Thai dish, you'd think of, like, pad Thai, or you'd think of massaman curry. You go out to Thailand and Thai locals do not eat that. That is, like, westernized.
I was going to say it's like Chinese or sort of Indian dishes that, you know, didn't they invent Vindaloo in Manchester or something? And it's not even a thing in India.
Tikka masala was Glasgow or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's bizarre.
It's weird.
There we go. There's a new novel for a dystopian book. Weird food that doesn't quite fit in anyway.
Yes,
maybe not.
Yeah.
Have you got any family at all?
I don't have, like, children, if that's what you mean.
Well,
no.
Anything.
No children yet. Yet is the key word, hopefully in the future. But yeah, I've now got two nieces and a nephew. So there are children running around at family Christmases and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, only one of them runs currently. The other two are too small.
Just wait till they're all running.
I know, it's going to be full on, isn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I'm married, and yeah, dad, in-laws, normal family stuff, really.
Yeah. That's all good. We've mentioned this first novel of the series, Son of Endless Days. Now, there are others in the series. What are they called? If people have been shouting at the device saying, "What's the other one called then?" Because we've been mentioning it quite a bit. What are they called?
Yeah, so number 2 is Storm at Dusk. Number 3 is Quiet Echoes at Night. And number 4 has yet to be revealed.
Oh, I was going to say maybe they can pre-order, but maybe not just yet.
No,
but I suppose they can follow you on social media and TikTok and things, and I'm sure you will tell people when the 4th one is ready to enter the world. Yes, great.
Yeah.
And so I know you're working on that one. Do you have any other projects? You've got loads of ideas, but, you know, is there something else that you actually are putting sort of pen to paper yet?
Yeah, so there's a couple of books that I would quite like to do. One of which I have written about 30,000 words for, which is a little bit different in the sense of it's set now, but it's a lady who has just retired, and she's decided to travel the UK in a camper van. And as she goes off, she's quite an eccentric character, she's quite funny, but as she goes off on her trip, a zombie apocalypse hits. And it's basically about her journey on this trip that she's determined to finish and go and see the landmarks she wants to see, even though there's zombies everywhere. And she picks up a 21-year-old Northern Irish girl. And it's really about the friendship that develops between them during this epic adventure. So that has just been a really fun thing to work on. I don't know if it will ever see the light of day, but it's kind of something that is just silly and ridiculous, and that I've just enjoyed as a creative release. And the other one that I'm going to think about working on is actually a romance set in the same world as my dystopian series, because I think it lends itself really well, and an idea just came to me and I was like, oh, that's a really good idea. So yeah, I'm sort of toying with that as well. But I've always got so many ideas. Maybe I need to find a job of just like giving story ideas and somebody else writes them, because it takes so long.
Oh, no, that's great. And where can people find you? We've mentioned social media. So what do people type in to their various social media search bars to find you and your content? And also, have you got a website? And more importantly, where can people buy your books?
Yeah, sure. So my social media handles on Instagram and TikTok is LG Jenkins Author. And I have a website, which is lgjenkins.com. And in terms of buying my books, if you are based in the UK, if you go to lgjenkins.com, you can get signed copies from there. Otherwise, Amazon, Barnes & Noble online, Waterstones online, all available through your online retailers.
Wonderful. That's wonderful. Well, thank you, Lydia. It's been great chatting with you today and learning all about dystopian fiction and everything else. So thank you for joining us here on Christian Book Blurb.
Thank you so much, Matt.
And thank you as well for listening to this episode. And we do hope to see you again really soon. A new episode drops on the 1st and the 15th of every month. So it'll only be a couple of weeks before we will be back again with another Christian author talking all about their books to encourage you in your discipleship, one book at a time. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon. Goodbye. Thanks for listening to Christian Book Blurb with your host, Matt McCleary. Do give it a like, give it a share, and let your friends know all about it. We do hope to see you again soon on another Christian Book Blurb.